We have covered Antonio Conte extensively on this channel, and we've broadly been right. That's because mostly we've been pointing out the obvious stuff, the things that people tend to get dead on about Conte in the first place, and Spurs fans probably know him relatively well by now, though I'd say they haven't got to the depths that maybe some other fans have gotten to because, well, you've got to do that over the life cycle of your relationship with your manager. At the moment, though, you'd imagine that they will be flying high after an incredible result and also an interesting performance against Leicester. It's interesting when you win by such a margin against a very downtrodden side. Do you really get to know the great depths of any manager or any of your players in that time? Well, let's unpack some of that. If you guys haven't already subscribed, hit the subscribe button. And if you haven't already shared it, maybe just share it with one more person. And by the World Cup, we can make 100K. Antonio Conte has these very obvious characteristics, these very obvious ideas of what people think Antonio Conte is, but then there are hidden depths to this guy, and we've seen a lot of those this season. We've also seen some of the flaws that come with those depths. We've seen the incredible depths in terms of tactical knowledge and battles, which first sort of came to light this season, at least, in a game against Thomas Tuchel, a manager who since that game has somewhat taken a bit of a nosedive. And Conte seemingly has gone the other way, despite the fact that Spurs' results haven't always gone his way. Now, because the characterization of the two managers, both of their seasons have sort of been encapsulated by what happened and the way they treated that result afterwards, right? Antonio Conte used it to galvanize players, probably used it to say, listen, if you trust in me, then there'll be more good results, but also will have used it to show, hey, I'm still going toe-to-toe with the top guys. And despite the fact that my team aren't running at full speed right now, I can still keep up with these managers that have had even more investment than me over the last couple of years. Now, granted, we found out other things about Chelsea since, but at the time, this was toe-to-toe stuff. Arguably, you could have also maybe taken it the other way, where you then say, hey, Conte should have won against this Tuchel and Chelsea side. But Conte is such a master of negotiating the narrative along with these just slightly subconscious ideas that everyone just gets sucked into things. Everyone just goes with the Conte narrative. And so we've seen that in so many different ways since that day, right? The Conte narrative broadly is he's not great in Europe. Broadly, I don't actually think he's bucked against that trend very much so far, but actually you will see that that doesn't seem to get his players down. There are certain managers in the league, and again, I'll go back to the Tuchel versus Conte thing, where when you need that result, when you need to change a key change within the side, you can manage to dig those things out. You've got your motivational tactics. Maybe you've got a couple of things that you know you can just seed with a couple of the players. And key with Conte, he has a few talismanic guys that he can turn to at different points. And within this Spurs team, boy, does he have some talismanic guys. Today, against Leicester, was a challenge in that you probably had a side that knew that if they lost by a significant margin, their manager was probably going to be gone. And if they did something impressive, well, that would buy them a little bit longer. Conte left out one of his talismanic guys, a guy who got a joint golden boot last season, and things weren't going particularly well. At one point, obviously, through the early penalty, Leicester were ahead. There was frustration. There was a lot of people who were still questioning whether there were sloppy elements, whether sitting too deep against a team like Leicester was maybe going against what Spurs actually wanted to do. Some people questioning Conte's tactics, how he actually plays in the Premier League. Other people saying, well, this is just how Conte does it. You have to trust in the process, trust in what's going on here. And before you know it, second half, they're out there and they're not drawing 2-2 anymore, they're 6-2 up and sailing into the last few minutes, right? Not only that, but they did it by bringing Son off the bench. Of course, one thing that's worth mentioning is Son's profile and the fact that this kind of fits in with where Conte has taken players before, right? I mean, he always picks guys who seem to have this incredible dedication principle, but also are incredibly dedicated to principle, right? And these are people who are able to operate within a level of dedication and how can I put it? Restrictive elements, which basically allow them to then perform on a wider level. So they are completely dedicated and they are completely into the Conte philosophy, right? Now, obviously, we know that Son has had this before with Poch. We know he's had it with other managers before where they basically said he's so dedicated to the cause. He's had this, obviously, at Inter before. He's had this with Italy before as well. And when he picks his guys perform to the max of their ability. I don't actually think Son changed the game all that much, but what this shows is, in buying one player in Richarlison, you suddenly have a full rotation of different tactical ideas up front. You can go from your 3-5-2 to your 4-2-4 to your 4-4-2 to an adaptable, sometimes numbers don't really matter kind of idea with Conte, where clearly numbers do matter, but it's not really about this always. It's about this in defense and this in attack. So in many ways, numbers do matter, you idiot. But you get what I mean, right? Then there were moments of individual brilliance. How often have we known Antonio Conte to anoint and then procure these moments of individual brilliance from players, not only getting the best out of players that a lot of people said they doubted, but also getting the best out of players when they are his guy, when they are the person who he's had that private chat with, who he said, hey, this is my idea for you, this is where I'm going to go with this. That is a typically Conte style piece of management. Not only that, but those moments of individual brilliance, I'm not even sure that Conte can take credit for. Although maybe if he'd have said to Son, you need to go up there, stand in this position, Kane will find you here, you know that there is some form of weakness there in that side and there are goals to be gotten there. But then why not put Harry Kane in that position? Why not put any of those players in that position? I mean, he kind of did before, but you get the point. And suddenly, a game is rampantly won rather than won just 1-0. Or just. Spurs ran out more than confident winners in this one. And you got to feel a bit sorry for Brendan Rodgers, because this is what Conte does. He plays around with tactics. He's sometimes on the back foot after a Champions League game and then suddenly back on the front foot again. He's level on points with Man City. He's level on points with Arsenal and then just behind on points with Man City. Other weeks he's level on points with Man City. Other weeks, hey, it was just another Conte week. That's the great thing about this Conte side. You can literally just go, it's just a Conte performance. And that writes it off. You start another week fresh. He takes responsibility for what happened for him. You take responsibility for what happened for you. And suddenly you can just wipe slates clean. Similar things happen with Pep. Similar things happen with Klopp. You go, hey, we tried something. It didn't work. We move on. He doesn't dwell on these things. He doesn't go, sometimes he does dwell on those things. But the point is, what he manages to do is control the narrative and the mood to such a degree that things can change so quickly. He doesn't get mired in these things very often. You'll often find that no matter what the public perception is, Conte's perception is way more important to that internal set of players than anyone outside of that. Now, you see it with a lot of managers, but you also see the opposite in the Premier League. Narrative sometimes gets to the players. There are managers within the Premier League who are also very susceptible to outside influence. Say Brendan Rodgers, say Thomas Tuchel. Managers who are great managers, but don't seem to have that same gravitas that they need. Don't seem to have that same, hey, we're going to pull through this particular scenario today and get this. Now, it wasn't only the introduction of Son that changed the game. Spurs were already in the ascendancy. You could see Leicester was still biting back, but what they really wanted to do was just stretch the game. Spurs were deep, counter-attack, deep, counter-attack, and they always just sprung. They were like a spring on the opposition. Compress and go back, compress and go back, and Leicester just had no answer for it. Conte knew that and completely exploited it. So he has his talismanic guys, but then he also has these other guys who are just tough guys within the team who can put their foot on the ball, get it to these people very, very quickly and make a huge difference in the game. Not only that, but then he also doesn't care if he absolutely just goes crazy on another side. If anything, it proves Martello, the hammer, is exactly what you say he is. He hammers these guys, but then they're in such great form, they're in such great fitness, they are within a zone within Conte, almost similar to Mourinho, similar to when Liverpool were white hot, and similar, actually not really similar to Pep, but similar to these other managers who seem to have a mental hold over some of these guys. Suddenly you're in a position where we need to capitalise. We've never been in this position before. And the Premier League is so open this year, at least at this point, despite City looking so dominant, that if Spurs can manage to put a series of these performances together, then they could still be keeping up with City come later in the season. So what I'm saying is, I get it. Like, we all expect Spurs to fall away. We expect Arsenal to fall away. We expect Liverpool not to catch up. We expect Chelsea not to be able to do the same. We expect it to be some sort of record this season. But if there's anyone in the league that's capable of doing something that we're not quite expecting right now. I'd say it's Antonio Conte. And I get it, there'll be Arsenal fans that are shouting at the screen right now saying, hey, you're not giving us enough credit anymore. There's Arsenal videos to come. It's not me saying that Arsenal are terrible. It's me saying, let's extol the virtues of a Conte side here. And in many ways, there's like a yin and yang between Conte and Arteta. Those two guys, whilst they are both tactically brilliant, also have different ways of motivating the players and probably appreciate the other guy in some way. Both of them have been underestimated. Both of them have been told they don't have the right mentality to take a team to the very top. Both of them have been told throughout their careers, hey, you're not quite the very top of your footballing game here. You are there to support other guys. And then gone into management and been told you are tactically brilliant. There are a lot of equivalencies between the two. There are a lot of good comparisons that I would probably like to draw. But at the same time, the way and the place they get their players into are two very different areas. Arteta seems quite almost taken with the outside world sometimes. He seems to want to bring a lot of things in. Conte seems to want this siege mentality, or at least not similar to Mourinho, but similar to an army. He wants his guys, he wants to be the little general, the guy who brings it all together. I think it's the condottiere or something like that in Italian, right? He is the guy who they all rally around. And, you know, we're almost talking like a 300 style mentality here. We're the guys, I've got a very small team that I can rely on and bring little pieces in and out. And then, of course, he's got his own decisions that he made in the off-season that he now needs to wrestle with. A couple of times today, we saw Richarlison getting beaten to certain balls. We saw Richarlison not quite looking right. He stuck with him there. He made a decision for at least 60-ish minutes that he was going to do this with Richarlison. That in many ways, if you keep hammering out what Spurs are trying to do in the first half, the second you bring Son on in the second, it's almost like a bait and switch. Leicester just couldn't deal with it. And Conte is a master of reading the game, changing things ever so slightly, and the opposition manager then needing to keep up or needing to be ahead. He's also the master of reading what the opposition are doing or what the change the manager had just made, and then saying, right, I'm going to try this. He did that against Tuchel, he's done it against a number of other sides. And that's sometimes where he falls short in the Champions League. Spurs are now a side that need to play against certain kinds of teams, and maybe that is why they will fall away. But if they can drag a number of teams in the Premier League into these slogfests, into real matches, which is probably what Conte wants to do this year, they'll get good results. And in time, you will see Conte's methods being implemented more and more and more and more and more. Spurs probably see themselves not as this Juventus side that Conte wants managed, but as the Inter side that Conte wants managed. Possibly as a Chelsea side that Conte wants managed. As these sides who bond together extremely fast and don't look outside and go, you know what, we're not quite as good as the other guys. Conte is a master of saying, I'm changing the narrative here. So what is the narrative? Is it that Spurs go for the top of the league? Second, are they there to challenge City, or are they there to just finish ahead of Arsenal? Are they there to just get Champions League again? It seems a lot like Conte is a lot more confident in the league, so why not back him there? I don't quite think he has the depth of squad, by the way, to compete on multiple fronts in the Champions League and in the league. So I'd suggest Conte will probably do what Conte does best and focus on the league. It's interesting as well to see the reaction of the players. It's interesting to see the reaction of Son. It's interesting to see all these people's reactions at this point. Son doesn't look resentful. He doesn't look like he hates his manager in any way. He just got some incredible goals and got a hat-trick within a matter of minutes. And you know the weird thing about it is, when you watch it, the players almost go, yep, that figures out. Yep, that's it, almost exactly as I would have expected it. So I wonder how much this game was prepared for in this way. Let me know who you thought had a great performance in the comments below. I'll probably focus on a lot of the obvious parts. But if you're a Spurs fan, where are you finishing? Who are your good players at the moment? And I get it, like there are still some frailties. There are still those Conte idiosyncrasies that maybe some sides can't get out of. And maybe he wants to get ahead of conceding 2 goals to Leicester or conceding at all to Leicester. But then Conte's got this answer to it. Sometimes it doesn't come off, and sometimes people find a way to mock Conte. But I'm really loving just watching Spurs become more Contified. I've probably got to find a new word for that. The Contification of Spurs is still very much midway through the process. The weird thing is, it's got a long way to go. That, for Spurs fans, is good. Anyway, I'll chat to you guys later. See you in a bit.